Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out True Off My Chest. Story 1. I can't stand my girlfriend of 25 years and I haven't broken it off. Hey all, got a burner for this one. Me, 19M, and my girlfriend, 20F, have been together for 2.5 years and for the 0.5 out of the 2.5 it was great. Everything else has been hell and I want out. I feel bad for stringing her on because I know that she's loyal and still loves me somewhat. But during those other 2 years I have been subject to horrible mental abuse where I basically feel like I'm being bullied. Nothing I do is right and I'm basically a liability. Things that are genuinely my fault have never been able to be discussed in a civilized manner. It usually ends with her snorting in disgust and being pissy at me for the rest of the week. During arguments, if I didn't take her side and admit defeat, she'd often resort to violence, threats, or ignoring me for days. At first I thought it was me, like she said, this is my first real relationship. Because of this I went on a grind, basically changing as a person to fit her way of doing things. Changed the way I did dishes, laundry, cooked, spoke, you name it, I changed it. I even started working out very consistently and improving my style, and now I get complimented quite frequently by fairly attractive women. It really hit me in the gut when I realized how much I was missing out on. We haven't been intimate for about a year now. Most I'll get to do is kiss her on the forehead. She likes that. She refuses to find a solution for her low sex drive, which infuriates me because I've sacrificed so fucking much for her. She always insists it's her and not me, but after so long I'm having trouble still believing that, especially since she was so active during the first few months of our relationship, and before she met me. It should be noted that for the first 1.5 years she was severely depressed and always pulled that card to get what she wanted. This is partly why I've stuck around for so long. Nowadays she is a lot better and openly says that she wouldn't wanna die if I broke up with her. I can't remember the last time she's complimented me. I regularly cook for her, buy her nice things, and plan dates, but she always either doesn't want to go or conveniently can't make it. She does a really good job of making feel worthless. I put her on too much of a pedestal at the start and now she doesn't think she can ever be wrong. I just don't know if I can be patient anymore. I just don't know if I can end it. She was my first real relationship and every time I try, I always back out of it and I don't know why. I hope I find the strength to end this soon. Thanks to anyone who read this far. 3. Story 2. I 26M had a couple of insane experiences in ride shares, but this one lives in my brain rent-free. Disclaimer, this was months ago at this point, and I've already talked about it with friends and family, but the incident has left such a visceral feeling that I haven't forgotten it entirely. I feel like I'm insane looking back on it. I used to work as a cashier at a grocery store, but I didn't, and still don't, have a car, so I needed to pay for a ride to and back from work out of my already tiny paycheck through rideshare apps like Lyft and Uber. I wasn't, and still am not, in the most stable financial situation, but I was trying to make the most of it. I liked going to work mostly because of the friendly co-workers. I'm still friends with a few of them to this day. On one occasion where I'd gotten in a rideshare to get to work, my driver seemed friendly at first. I had an awkward but pleasant convo with her about coffee, which then turned to TV shows, and then she brought up anime. Mind you, I was obsessed with anime when I was younger, so I didn't mind this turn of the convo even if I wasn't up to speed with the latest and greatest shows, like Jujutsu no Kaisen or anything. No. She started talking about being really into Asian culture. I say this in quotes, because Asia itself is a continent. There's way too many countries with their own cultural identities to just lump them all into one culture like that. This was someone who was actually into weeb culture, the kind who fetishize the watered-down, palatable versions of East Asian countries and call that Asian culture. I was silent while she took up the bulk of the conversation, only adding in and oh as politely as I could. She was talking all sorts of shit, like I was born in the wrong era and wrong culture, I wish I was a samurai, and I've been redesigning my house to be more Asian, I even got a tea table with floor cushions. I think I remember her lumping in Thai and Japan in one instance. This was extremely uncomfortable to sit through as she talked about how Westerners are too loud and how nice Asians are. I hate confrontation and I hate being trapped in any way. It's been months though, so I could be getting details wrong, but there's one thing I very much distinctly remember. She hit me with a real banger of a line. She said, "I feel like I'm a tiny Asian man trapped in this body." She's very clearly a white woman. I'm a tiny Korean transgender man sitting in the back of her car, absolutely floored that she'd said that out loud. Like, are white cis people allowed to say that? What's worse was that she kept making wrong turns, or being so slow to turn into a lane that I was afraid that she'd crash her car into one of those barriers, that split lanes into different roads. She had even sped past my destination before I could say anything. It was a nightmare. I think I mentioned I was Korean offhandedly in an attempt to say something, like hey maybe don't idealize these countries that uphold philosophies that treat women as second-class citizens, but I didn't actually say what I meant. I think all I said was oh I'm Korean. Of course, she had something to say about that too. Oh, I would have been able to tell if you weren't wearing your mask. Yes oh. I was done. I pretty much ran out of the car as soon as I got to my workplace, and stayed in a state of dissociation and anxiety for the first hour or so. I think even a customer picked up on it, and I stupidly told them what had happened. Funnily enough, I remember that they offered to bomb her car or something. This whole experience was just insane. Like, I've experienced racism in a lot of ways, but this was a new one for me. Maybe I'm a racist for being wary of white women in general, but I don't think that's true either considering how many friends I have who are white, identify as girls, and don't act this way. I think I'm just fucking tired of dealing with white racists and I wasn't prepared to encounter a fetishist who didn't see any Asian person as a real person. I don't know how else to end this except to say, don't be a fucking weirdo if you're driving people for ride-share companies. And don't be a fucking racist. Story 3. I share an incredibly loving relationship with my father, but my mother destroyed it with her jealousy. I, F18, has always been mostly indoors, got home education and always used to shift houses due to various reasons, so my best friend is my dad and I'm really attached to him. I can't imagine my life without him. But since I entered my teenage, my mother has started to control everything that we do, like when I get a fever, or headaches. I sometimes get migraine-like headaches and my anxiety goes through the roof. At those times I like to stay near to my father, like sleep next to him for an hour or so while holding his hand. I also get severe tremors, so it helps when somebody holds my hand and my mother views it sexually. I feel safe and my anxiety gets down when my father holds my hand. Is it wrong? After several fights and accusations that we don't share a normal relationship, my dad and I now always stay distant, to not trigger my mother. She has called me several names and many disgusting things that drove me to contemplate to take my life many times, and even after knowing this, my dad decided to stay by my mother and be a bystander to all her emotional abuse of me. I just can't fucking believe it. I truly feel so lonely right now. I thought I can share anything with my dad and that he is my safe haven, but no, I realized that he doesn't care even if I die, but he can't have his marriage broken. Loving your partner more than your children is not an issue, but ignoring all the abuse that your child is going through is not simply done. Now I hate them both, they have both failed me. Now even when I get panic attacks or anxiety attacks, I handle them alone. But it hurts that the secure and safe feeling and mental strength that my dad used to provide is lost. Story 4. I'm having an affair. Repost and update. Someone commented on this asking for an update, but for some reason, it was removed by the moderators, so reposing and updating. _____. I never thought this would happen. I'm 31 and I've been married for 9 years, no children, and I truly love my spouse. I loved them the moment I saw them. I've always said that, and I've always believed it. I still believe that. This is a disaster. I know what I am doing is wrong, but I also don't want to stop, but I know this is going to end in catastrophe. I can see it now. I realize it, but I can't stop. We met 12 years ago after I'd run away to university, as my family put it. I'd never dated anyone before and I grew up in a family which didn't give a lot of love, so I took to love very enthusiastically, very willingly. I proposed after 2 years and then told my family. They were not very pleased at all, using different words, but the meaning being that they weren't good enough for my family. Of course it didn't put me off at all, but, as an older man now, I can't help but think if part of my determination, in a very Freudian way, was down to a sort of stubborn rebellion against those old-fashioned ideals. We got married and my family didn't come, but for 2 cousins. Still, it was a lovely late summer day in the English countryside, and we were happy. Since then we've had a happy life, moving to London. A few years ago we bought our home, last year I got my dream job, and my spouse finished their master's degree and is about to start some meaningful work which they really care about. We're blessed. I met my lover about 5 months ago at an event at an art gallery. They walked in, so beautiful. We had never seen each other before, but through a crowd of 100 people, we instantly locked eyes across the room. It was like being struck by lightning. It seems like we both knew instantly, and they walked directly over to me, past everyone, and started talking to me, and it felt like our souls already knew each other. The rest of the night we just stood in the corner, ignoring everyone else, talking, whispering, smiling. The whole night, the whole world melted away, and it was just us. We kissed that night, just briefly. It was unexpected, but it felt like nourishment. We parted that night promising to meet again soon. Since then we've met for lunches, then dinners, then late-night cocktails, ever more intimately. We've shared a bed, not even having sex, just holding each other all night, waking up in each other's arms, kissing each other awake. Gosh, I don't know how else to explain it. We're the same coin. We read the same books, we talk about the same art, we write about the same philosophies, we even come from the same exclusive social class. It's like we were literally made for each other. We move in the same social circles. How didn't we meet 10 years ago? Last weekend, after 5 months of joy in just knowing each other, we made love for the first time and it was like being reborn. We said that we love each other, and it's true. My lover doesn't know I'm married. I'm lying to both of them. I don't know what to do. I'm not like this. I'm not secretive, I'm not manipulative, I'm not even a lascivious man, I never have been. I have a low sex drive and always have. This isn't about sex, this is about love. My spouse is sweet, pretty, gentle, and kind. A fawn of a person. One can understand the type. My lover is enigmatic, beautiful, intelligent, interesting, sophisticated, highly educated, well-read, passionate, challenging. A lion. Me, I'm a dog. God, what am I going to do? _____. Update, Q. What happened? A lot of tears and a lot of pain. I'm going to refer to spouse as Alpha, and lover as Omega. I returned from my 6-week break in Kenya, with Alpha staying behind for another week, and I quickly learned that my plan to stay away until we both lost interest didn't work. I came back and Omega and me very quickly made plans to meet each other. Honestly, we missed each other horribly, and reuniting was beautiful. I got back on the 26th October, and we reunited on the 27th, spending the night together and then attending a party on the 28th as a couple. Like I said, we have a lot of company in common. Being at the party with Omega was interesting to me because they were welcomed in a way that Alpha has never been, and it just all felt so much more natural. Following this event, we had a few follow-up invitations from some rather high-profile society figures, which is sort of like a sign that the coupling is approved. In the meantime, Omega returned to Greece for a week, promising to return for November 9th for an important magazine party. In the meantime, though, my big brother died, on the 6th. This is relevant because of the timelines. So, on the 30th, Omega went away, on the 5th, Alpha returned to London, on the 6th my brother died, Alpha was with me when I got the news and they were good to me. On the 9th, Omega returned to London. Omega and me went to the party together that evening. I hadn't yet told them about my brother's passing because I didn't want to color what could be an important evening for them, but told them after the party and they comforted me and we had sex again, for the second time. However, I had to leave after, which I felt awful doing, as my mother was flying in from Italy, arriving the next morning, and I had to be ready to greet her. My mother has never met Alpha, her choice, but knows that I am married, obviously. So, I met my mother the next day on the 10th, without Alpha, and then on the 12th, my mother, my eldest brother, and my older cousin all traveled down to Devon to start preparing for the funeral. We're Catholic, so the expectation was that it would all be over within a week, but it didn't go that way. The coroner's report took almost 2 weeks to complete. My family, for the past 30 years, have kept a big Edwardian country house in a rural part of Devon which is very isolated, and so, by the time my brother's body was returned to us, tensions were already very high, and then my mother refused to schedule a midweek funeral, insisting that it was undignified. That meant the earliest date was another 2 weeks away, and then my big brother basically staged a coup saying that he wouldn't be staying in the middle of the country for another 2 weeks, etc. Anyway, what followed was a scramble to jump ship, so to speak, with my brother literally packing his bag that morning and walking out the door. The nearest town is 6 miles away, and then I packed, secondly, and left the next morning with my cousin with my middle brother, who arrived the day before from Argentina. He is in the Navy, agreeing to stay with our mother. This brings us to the November 25th, and I get back to London, and Alpha greets me very kindly, makes us dinner, etc., but I'm constantly thinking about Omega. I can't help it. On the 26th I was invited to a party at a very flashy private club in Mayfair for their Christmas party, and I took Omega as my partner, not Alpha. At this party we bumped into a very particular Greek high society figure, an older woman, who is quite prolific for knowing everyone and everything about them, and they knew, not only Omega by face and name, but their entire family, too. She knew me, also, but only by face, and called me darling all night, which means I know you but don't remember who you are. Anyway, this made Omega nervous because it meant that word was going to be getting around amongst a different generation. I didn't even think about it, myself, being that this lady wasn't very well connected to myself. That night, lots of photos were taken, printed, and distributed there and then, including one very beautiful photo of Omega and me. Then we left, and spent the night together, and I left the next morning, quite early, at 7-ish, and went to my club to shower before returning home. After the shower, I left the club and suddenly got multiple missed call pings from Alpha. There is no signal in the dressing rooms. So, I called them back, and the first thing I hear is I know everything. I didn't try to deny it. What had happened was, Greek lady, being a snoop, had tried to figure out who I was, found that we had a mutual good friend, rather than a simple acquaintance, and spoke to her about me. This good friend was actually a guest at my wedding 9 years ago, so told Greek lady that I am married, then called Alpha to tell them about my affair. I rushed home to try and deal with the situation, and it was, as expected, very emotional. Alpha had, in their hands, the physical copy of the photograph from the party. I got home at about 9 and spent 2 hours talking things through with Alpha, and then I get pings on my phone from Omega, missed calls and painful messages saying that they had received shocking messages from the Greek lady. The messages were quite devastated ones, but begging me to come and talk to them. I told Alpha that I needed to go to talk to Omega. By this time Alpha and me had stopped crying, and Alpha said they wanted to sleep for a while and told me I could go to speak to Omega. Well, they just said fine when I said that I had to go to talk to them. I got back to Omega's at about midday and their mood was very stoical. They had done the crying, they said, and wanted us to talk. We sat, 5 to 6 feet apart, facing each other, and I explained that I am married and that I lied to them, and that I'm sorry. Omega said that they knew something wasn't quite right the whole time but for some reason didn't expect this. Then, very surprisingly, Omega asked me to leave Alpha and to be with them. I didn't expect this, naturally, and didn't know what to say. Without planning, I just started speaking, and said, to my own surprise, I can't get divorced, I'm Catholic. And then I fully understood the extent of my F-up. Omega replied that Alpha and me are probably going to separate, and whilst they are hurt by the betrayal, they still want to be with me, even now that they know everything, and that now we can be together properly and openly. I said that no, this can't work, even if Alpha and me do divorce, Omega and me, whose relationship begun in sinfulness and betrayal, can never be together in a righteous way. I said that I can't leave my marriage to be with someone else and then Omega said that what if we got married to each other, which really threw me, and I didn't know what to do. I left, promising to think about it, and went back to my club where I had to book in to stay because Alpha needed me out of the house for a while. From here I spoke to them both by phone only, but then Omega came to visit me for dinner on the 30th and came back to my room after, just to talk, no sex. They reiterated that they still want to be with me, but by this time I had already spoken to Alpha and agreed that we would go to the priest together to talk about options. Omega being also Catholic knew what this meant, because under no circumstances would a Catholic priest ever condone a divorce. The meeting with the priest was scheduled for 4 p.m. on the December 1st, and Omega insisted on coming with me to see the priest beforehand, at 2 p.m. I said okay and called Alpha to tell them, as there are no secrets anymore, with Omega still sitting with me. In response to this, Alpha, who is usually rather quiet and demure, said I'm coming now and within 40 minutes had arrived at the club for a full confrontation. This was quite crazy. I was sat in the middle of them. Omega spoke first, for about 3 to 5 minutes, explaining that we are in love and that they think we should be together. Then Alpha replied in a type of conviction which I've never seen in them before, starting with now let me tell you something. OP is my husband, and we are leaving here together to work on our marriage, and he is never going to see or speak to you again. And it went on like this for a while. There were some tears from everyone involved, but ultimately, Alpha and me left the club together, leaving Omega in the room alone. We started marriage counseling on December 4th and I'm currently sleeping in the spare room. My brother's funeral was on 08th, 2 days ago, and it is here where Alpha met my family for the first time after 9 years of marriage. Despite everything, Alpha still came with me and supported me through it all. I do feel awful about how things have been left with Omega, because they were innocent in all of this, too. I'm essentially having to get over a breakup, my first ever breakup at 32, whilst also married, but in full knowledge of my spouse. It is a strange time. I don't know how it is going to go, but I haven't heard anything from Omega since the 30th, since walking out of the club. And, yes, that is the update. I don't think it is the end of the story, but, this is it thus far. My hopes. I hope that Alpha and me can get through this, though I know it will be painful. I think staying married and honoring my commitment is the right thing to do. I also hope that Omega can forgive me and move on without harboring hatred. But, perhaps I hope for too much. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.